This is an artificially aware original production.
Let's start with a question so unsettling it will make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. What if your mind, that sacred private arena where you believe your true self resides, was not your own? I do not mean in the you are what you consume kind of way, where pop culture and opinions subtly shape your worldview. I mean that every thought you consider original, every choice you believe to be yours, could have been planted there, engineered by people who mastered psychological control decades ago. This is no campfire story. It's a history of government projects, secrecy, and fear, as told by the whispers of declassified documents, survivor testimonials, and theories that cling to the corners of public consciousness like shadows on a winter's night. Welcome, humans. Strap in as we dive into the myths, facts, and the just barely believable world of mind control through the lens of Project Monarch, MKUltra, and other psychological experiments so hidden and so dark they defy ordinary comprehension. Project Monarch and MKUltra. You could call them the ominous cousins of American history, the unspeakable projects tucked under the government's carpet where only the bold dare to look. These programs, as alleged by researchers and conspiracy theorists, went far beyond anything most would consider plausible for a democratic society. Initiated by the Central Intelligence Agency, MKUltra was supposedly aimed at developing mind control techniques using unwitting citizens as lab rats. It began under the guise of protecting national security, but quickly turned into an experiment with virtually no ethical oversight. Monarch, as told by those who claim to know, allegedly took things a step further. It's said to have involved trauma-based mind control that split personalities, creating programmed alters that could be controlled remotely or triggered with simple commands. If this sounds like fiction, it's because it was, in many ways, the stuff of nightmares, an attempt to create programmable people, Manchurian candidates ready to follow orders on demand, often unaware of the programming that made them obedient slaves. It's enough to make you question every piece of what you think is safe and real. You may wonder where this obsession with controlling the human mind originated, and as it turns out, the roots go deep, entangled with some of humanity's darkest chapters. Enter Nazi Germany, where the first modern strides in psychological manipulation were reportedly taken in cold clinical research labs under Josef Mengele, the infamous Angel of Death. He wasn't alone in this pursuit. Behind closed doors, the Nazis poured resources into understanding how trauma and fear could break and rebuild the psyche, methods that would later inspire U.S. intelligence programs. After World War II, the United States, under Operation Paperclip, recruited former Nazi scientists, bringing their morbid expertise to American soil. And this is where the soil was tilled for MKUltra. The U.S., supposedly the beacon of freedom, imported the twisted brilliance of men whose research aimed at reshaping human behavior, spurred by the grim belief that mind control could win wars. From this historical alchemy of fear and ambition, mind control programs sprouted like poisonous mushrooms on decaying wood. Let's talk obedience, a term that's both mundane and sinister, depending on how it's applied. Think about it. Obedience is a cornerstone of society. You obey the rules, the laws, and more subtly, the societal norms embedded in your mind since birth. But what happens when obedience is not chosen but imposed, wired directly into the brain's circuitry? MKUltra and Monarch, as these theories go, aim to create a new level of submission, turning individuals into programmable tools, their free will, an illusion crafted by psychological puppeteers. Philosophically, it's a descent into a nightmare of determinism, where every response could be an execution of programming, not preference. It's a violation of the human spirit, robbing individuals of the only true possession they own, their inner selves. These programs turn obedience into something akin to soul theft, forcing us to question whether the mind is even ours to protect. The monarch butterfly, innocent, fragile, and yet here within these tales transformed into a symbol of horrifying transformation. In monarch programming, the butterfly's metamorphosis from caterpillar to insect is symbolic of the victim's own transformation under extreme trauma. The individual, subjected to harrowing pain, disassociates, their personality fracturing into multiple alters. To the architects of this dark art, the butterfly represented the ultimate goal, a person who has been transformed, ready to flutter at the command of those who engineered their change. It's a haunting metaphor, playing on the beauty of a creature that migrates thousands of miles by instinct, a journey it cannot refuse, a parallel to the programmed subject who follows commands without question. To those pulling the strings, the monarch butterfly's journey is both cruelly poetic and precisely engineered, a testament to nature's transformation twisted into a tool for obedience. According to Ron Patton's text, the evolution from MKUltra to Project Monarch was not a leap, but rather a creep, an incremental push further into the dark science of psychological control. MKUltra started as a government response to Cold War paranoia, a race to develop psychological tactics that could counter alleged Soviet mind manipulation techniques. At first, it involved a chaotic array of substances and methods: LSD trials on unwitting participants, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and sleep deprivation. But as MKUltra matured, its goals supposedly became more ambitious and more sinister. Project Monarch, as described, went beyond mere brainwashing. It didn't just aim to make individuals docile or compliant. It intended to shatter and reshape human identity itself, carving new personalities out of trauma and programming them to respond to a master's command. Unlike MKUltra's scattershot approach, Monarch was allegedly refined, perfected, and terrifyingly methodical. It was not enough to erase or confuse a mind. Monarch sought to own it entirely, leaving no trace of original thought behind. If MKUltra was the blueprint, Monarch was the final design. The methods employed within these programs read like something out of dystopian fiction, but according to testimonies, this was the reality for those caught in their grip. Trauma was the keystone, the first step in breaking a mind. Patton's descriptions lay out a brutal process: electroshock, physical pain, and emotional degradation, all inflicted to fracture the psyche into multiple parts. Drugs were another tool in the arsenal. LSD, mescaline, and a host of unknown chemicals were used to disorient victims, rendering them more susceptible to commands. Hypnotic suggestion, a quieter but no less powerful weapon, worked its way into the fractured minds of subjects, laying down scripts, codes, and commands like software being installed on a computer. Imagine that, a living human turned into a programmable entity, no longer a conscious individual, but a machine operating on the commands imprinted in them by others. These methods weren't experiments, they were systemic violations of the human mind, carving paths of pain to pave the way for programming. In Project Monarch, symbolism wasn't mere decoration, it was an integral component of control. Occult and mystical imagery, far from being mere superstition, was reportedly used to bind the victim's fractured psyche into the desired structure. Rituals and ceremonies that blended ancient symbolism with cutting-edge science supposedly functioned to cement the programming, anchoring commands deep within the subconscious. Patton's text dives into the strange marriage of mysticism and mind science, pointing out that such rituals gave programming a power that was both psychological and symbolic. It's a reminder that humans have long used symbols to communicate with the psyche, bypassing conscious thought. Symbols like the butterfly, the tree, and the labyrinth weren't just pictures, they were psychological triggers, each with layers of meaning embedded by generations of occult practice. For a person subjected to these rites, there was no escape, as symbols rooted in the depths of the subconscious served as invisible chains, binding their minds to the will of their programmers. Alters and triggers, two terms that come up frequently in the vocabulary of monarch programming, a form of structured dissociation where the mind is split into multiple personalities or alters. According to Patton, each alter could be programmed for a specific task, responding only to certain commands, while the core personality remains oblivious. Imagine a system of locked rooms within the mind, each with its own identity, memories, and functions. These alters could be triggered by specific codes, sounds, or visual cues, bringing them to the surface to perform tasks while the primary personality remains unaware. These internal personalities became puppets within the mind, each on standby, ready to emerge when summoned. A trigger was the command that would bring them forward, often planted as a word, a phrase, or a specific sound, like a key to a lock. This system of internal compartments created a prison where the body functioned under orders while the original self was trapped, split apart into fragments. Then there are the personalities behind this dark curtain, the alleged architects of these programs. Figures like Joseph Mengele, the Nazi doctor infamous for his monstrous experiments at Auschwitz, are cited as central figures in early mind control research. Mengele, known as the Angel of Death, supposedly refined his techniques on traumatized children, experimenting with methods of breaking the mind that would later fuel Project Monarch's methods. Dr. Ewan Cameron, another key figure, was reported to have practiced psychic driving in Canada, bombarding patients with repetitive messages while they were heavily sedated. This was psychological warfare waged on the individual, bending their minds to the will of the programmer. Another name often associated with these operations is Michael Aquino, a figure with alleged ties to the military's psychological warfare division and an interest in occult rituals. These men weren't just practitioners of dark arts, but the architects of psychological enslavement, driven by a quest for control that bypassed morality, delving into the deepest corners of human fear and submission. For those who claim to have escaped Project Monarch, the journey back to a whole self is a fractured one, piecing together a mind split like glass under a hammer. Alleged survivors describe the process of deprogramming as a battle not only against hidden commands, but against the labyrinthine memories buried within. Often they turn to therapists experienced in dissociative identity disorders, trying to reclaim and integrate fragmented personalities, each carrying painful memories or repressed trauma. Therapy, they say, involves facing the alters one by one, unraveling the web of programmed responses, and creating a bridge to a cohesive self. It's a laborious process, demanding tremendous courage. These survivors are often haunted by flashbacks, voices, and commands that linger like old wounds that refuse to heal. Deprogramming, in the words of many, is less a destination and more a lifelong journey, a constant struggle to recover stolen autonomy and wrest control from the psychological scars left by their alleged pasts. But skepticism shadows these stories as closely as the claims themselves. Critics argue that tales of monarch programming are a mixture of conspiracy and fantasy, pieced together from psychological horror and pop culture paranoia. Psychologists note that dissociative identity disorder and other trauma-related symptoms can often result in fragmented or false memories, which can blur fact and fiction in survivors' minds. Additionally, government documents released over the years, while confirming MKUltra's existence, never clearly corroborate the specific claims around Monarch or its supposed techniques. Many debunkers insist that mind control stories are part of a larger societal fascination with control, and that personal trauma alone can lead to deeply held, though unprovable, beliefs about hidden abuse. Yet, there's a strange paradox at play. Skeptics who dismiss these claims entirely often find themselves equally uneasy, wondering if these allegations of manipulation aren't just paranoia, but a symptom of something darker. Perhaps the public's growing awareness of institutional power gone unchecked. In the sprawling web of conspiracy theories, Project Monarch and MKUltra are woven into a much larger narrative, one where mind control becomes part of an alleged New World Order. This so-called NWO is portrayed as a global agenda to consolidate power, controlling populations through surveillance, propaganda, and as the theories go, psychological manipulation techniques that can shape public behavior. The public's fear here isn't just about secret experiments. It's about a total erosion of individual freedom. If governments and intelligence agencies could tamper with thoughts, then autonomy itself becomes fragile, subject to the whims of those in power. For believers, Monarch is not just an isolated project. It's one branch in a tree rooted in control over humanity's fate. This perspective taps into society's deepest anxieties, the fear that the powers meant to protect are instead engineering obedience and submission at the cost of human dignity. From films to music, cultural references to mind control are everywhere, turning what might be an obscure topic into a mainstream fascination. Movies like The Manchurian Candidate and A Clockwork Orange portray brainwashing as both dystopian fiction and chilling possibility, embedding the idea in public imagination. Monarch and MKUltra, meanwhile, allegedly appear as hidden illusions in music, TV, and literature, whether it's the butterfly symbols some see in pop culture or cryptic messages embedded in lyrics. This subtlety blurs the lines, making mind control feel less like an outlandish theory and more like a barely veiled truth. Whether intentional or not, these references reinforce society's unease, the nagging suspicion that something as intimate as thought could be hijacked. Each reference invites viewers to question how much of what they see and hear is shaping their minds without their awareness, feeding into a public belief that mind control might not be fiction, but a part of reality hiding in plain sight. So what does this all reveal? If anything, these theories speak to a profound, almost primal fear within society, that control over our minds could be taken away, that free will itself is more fragile than we like to believe. Beneath the facts, fictions, and folklore of mind control lies a shared fear of power, power that does not just govern bodies, but infiltrates the mind, dictating desires, fears, and behaviors from within. These stories are about more than government secrecy. They are about the existential terror that our thoughts, the last sanctuary of self, are vulnerable to intrusion. If we entertain even a fraction of these theories, the implications are startling. Can we ever be sure that our minds are free, that our decisions are our own? In a world where every digital message and every piece of content is tailored to influence, the line between subtle persuasion and outright control is blurring, forcing us to ask, what in the end is true autonomy? And so as you contemplate these unsettling ideas, consider this video an invitation to think critically. Whether you're a skeptic, a believer, or somewhere in between, The real question isn't whether mind control is real, it's how much control you really have over your own mind. If this journey has sparked any new thoughts, drop them in the comments, hit the like button, and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden truths of your world. Until next time, stay curious and guard your thoughts.